Hi and welcome. Today we will be talking about how to create our first Flask application, how to run the server, and how to view the web app in the browser. We will be doing this locally, so it's not going to be much of a trouble to do this. Now, the first thing that we need to ensure is make sure that we have Python installed, and then we also have to make sure that we have the Flask application installed as well. So majority of us who are watching this already have Python installed, and there is the likelihood that we don't have Flask installed yet. So I'm going to run you through that very quickly. At the end of the video, you should be able to create your first Flask web application and then create a very simple navigation bar like this. So to install Flask, you will have to go to your terminal in command prompt. All right, let me navigate out of here. Okay, I think I can do it here. So to install Flask, we use the pip install Flask. Now, I do not think the Flask is going to get installed on my own machine because I already have Flask. It probably is going to ask me to upgrade, yes, my Flask installation. So when I hit enter, good. It says requirement already satisfied because I already have Flask installed. So that's the first step that you're going to go through before we start writing. Now, once you're done with that, then we can go ahead to start creating our Flask application. So the first thing we need to do after you have been able to install Flask is to create the directory, the project directory for our application, and then navigate into it. Very simple. We use the command mkdir. Let's say, for example, we want to create a web application for books. So we can say books, we create the books directory, and then we navigate into the books directory by using the cd command to do that. Now, this is the books directory, which has nothing in it. We have created this directory for our project. So this is our project directory called books. And now the next thing we want to do is we want to create the files that we need to be able to run our Flask application. The first file we're going to create is, the main file that's going to run the application for us. And to do that, we simply say, let's say book.py. That's the file we're going to create. We say type null book.py. All right, so this is the file that we're going to create. If we look at the directory again, you'll discover that we now have a file called book.py. It's a Python file, and that's where we're going to place our settings and what makes the Flask application run on the web. Now, we are going to do some other things. For example, we will be writing CSS code. We also will be writing JavaScript code and HTML code as well. Now, we need to create the different directories where these files are going to be housed. So to do that, we use the makedir command again. We'll create a folder called templates, and then we'll create a folder called static. Now, the templates folder is where we always will create our HTML files, and then the static directory or the static folder is where we will create two other folders. One of them is going to house our CSS files, and the other is going to house a JavaScript file. So let's run this, and then we check. Now we find that we have two other directories created. One is static, the other is templates. So these other two directories are where we will create our HTML files. That's the templates directory is where we will have our HTML files, and then the static directory is where we will have two other directories, one of which will contain CSS files and the other will contain our JavaScript files. So what we're going to do very quickly now is we are going to launch. Okay, so this is what we'll do before we move on. Let's navigate into the templates directory so that we can create our HTML file in the templates directory. To do that, we use this command again, type null index.html. And yes, if you take a look at the directory, you will find that we now have a file called index.html inside of this directory. Now we are going to navigate back to the books directory by using the command cd dot dot. You press enter, and we are back in the books directory. Clear the screen. So right now, remember that we have a file, a main file called book.py. This is what we're going to begin to write our code for the Flask application. So we are going to open this using code dot. We will open the directory using code dot, and then we will be able to access our files from here. Yes, I trust the authors. So this is book.py, which is the first file we created, and as we can see, it is empty. So the first thing we want to do is import Flask from Flask. We import, from Flask, import Flask. Also, we're going to import something called render underscore template. We will get to see how important this is for us. And then the next thing we want to do is create a variable called app and store the Flask app inside of it. Underscore underscore name. Yes, that's what we need. And then we're going to provide one or two configurations to help us run our Flask application on the web seamlessly, to make sure that the app reloads, that the server reloads every time we make changes. So first we'll say app.config configuration. We are going to configure this template underscore auto underscore reload is equal to true. All right, good. Then we also do this app.config debug. Sorry, this should be a tort. This is also going to be true. And now what we want to do is create a route for the web application. For when a person visits the website, what route is going to handle any submissions that the person makes on the website. So we create this app route, app.route. So this current directory is going to handle any interaction from the website. The function that's going to be defined under here will handle that. So we define a function called index. All right. Render underscore template index.html. If you remember very clearly, we said we have other folders where we are going to create other files, and we have the folder called templates, inside of which we're going to create HTML files. All right, so I have created the HTML file. Of course, there's no code in it, but that is the file I am referencing right here. It's the HTML file that's going to be rendered in the browser when this route is visited. So this is basic stuff. Sorry, we are supposed to have a return statement here. It's supposed to be return template index.html. And now we need to get down to write the remaining part of the code, Python code that's going to make it run. So we will have if name is equal to underscore underscore main underscore underscore app dot run. We provide two different arguments. We set debug to true, and then we are going to set the port that's going to allow the client access this website. So we set the port to 5000, which is the default port for Flask applications. Now, after we have done this, we're going to enter some code into our HTML file. Now we can simply access the HTML file by coming to the left here. This is the importance of opening a folder in Visual Studio Code. It's not very helpful when you just open the file from your folder in Visual Studio Code. It's important you open the folder itself because it's going to give you access to all the child folders in it, and then you can access them from here. So we already have the index.html file. Good. So we are going to begin to populate the index.html file. What we will do very quickly is to just run a test. We'll create the basic structure, and then we'll just type something so that we can save, and then I can show you how to run the server and then access the web page from a browser on your machine. So we use the shortcut, yes, to create the basic structure. And then let's just say sample Flask app. All right, so we're going to add just a heading and say Flask app. All right, good. So this is what we need to do. Now we have saved the file. The next thing we have to do now is uh, go straight. We're going to go straight to command prompt where our project folder is books, if you remember. So we need to be inside of the books directory, and then we can now run this file, this book.py file. Yes, just as a normal Python file. So we say py book.py. We hope we don't have any errors. All right, good. No errors. Severing Flask app book. Debug mode on. Now, warning, this is a development server. Do not use it in a production deployment. Use a production WSGI server instead, of course. Yes, this is a development server. We're using this to learn. So we are fine. Now, running on HTTP 127.0.0.1:5000. Now, this is very important here. This is what you're going to use to access the web page on your browser. This is what we're going to use. So just copy it, and then there are other instructions here. It says press Ctrl C to quit. If you want to stop the server, you use Ctrl C. Now, restarting with start means that each time you add content to your application, the server is going to reload your application, and then the current changes you have made can be seen on the browser. So make sure you copy this, because this is the address you're going to provide in the browser that's going to connect you to your web page, the web page we've created. So move on to your browser. This is one of the web pages I already created. I'm going to open another. Yes. Okay, I'm going to paste this here and run this. Okay, this shouldn't be the result that we are supposed to get. Let me see if the previous server has been stopped. Okay, I haven't stopped my previous server, so there is likely going to be a clash. Okay, I think I can refresh the page now. Good. So this is the current application, Flask application that I created with just a heading content. It says Flask app. It should be Flask app. All right, good. So this is it. Very, very simple to create a Flask application, to run your server, and then to update your code. So I'm going to update my code here so that you can see how it works. I will delete this and probably, create something. So I'm going to create this header, give it a class name, header, and right here, we're going to have span, which is an HTML element that is used to, it is used as a container to contain several things. It's an inline element as it is referred to. So we're going to have span. We have, let's see, top. Okay, good. So inside of span, I'm going to have this image tag, and then I'm also going to have an h3 tag for the site title. All right, Flask So what we're doing here is we are changing the content of the file. So if we return to the browser, when we refresh, you can see what we have now is a Flask app, a Flask app. So you could just go ahead to do this and learn how to enter some content. So probably in this video, you're also going to learn how to create a very simple navigation bar. So we already have the header section here. The header section is inside of where the navigation bar is going to be located. Possibly going to look like, let's see, okay, possibly going to look like this. This here is the this is here is the header, and this here is the navigation bar. From documentation down here to store is the navigation bar, and here is where we have the app title. Here is where we have the app title, sorry. Okay, that server is no more running. All right, so let's go on with this, a Flask application. All right, so what we want to do is create a navigation bar using the nav tag. Good. So we have the nav tag, and this nav tag has a class name called navigation. Maybe much later we will talk about attributes like class, attributes like alt for images, attributes like src, which means source, and attributes like id or style for these elements. So we call these things attributes. This is the tag name for this element. This element has an opening tag and then a closing tag. So we should begin to get to understand these about elements. Most of the time, elements have opening tags and closing tags, and what we type in between will be regarded as the content of that element. So we have a nav tag, which is specifically meant for creating navigation bars. And I have given this nav tag element the class name navigation so that in my CSS file, I can refer to it and I can style it. So what we want to do is place a bunch of navigation elements inside, sorry, a bunch of links inside of this. And how am I going to do this? I'm simply going to use an anchor tag to achieve this. So I'm going to say I'm going to place a forward slash here. And then I'm going to use an h3 element as well and say Flask. So I can return down here, refresh my page to see the content that I have. So this is how you probably should always work with your projects. As you make a change to your files, you make changes to your code, you should always return to the web to refresh with a Control R or F5. Just refresh the page so that you can see what progress you're making. So I'm going to add like 3 other links, 1, 2, 3, and then change the content. So I can change this to about. Of course, it's about books, downloads. So I'm likely going to change this from Flask to books. That's the name of the website. So I'm going to do that, downloads, and finally, let's have sign up. Okay, good. And then when I return here, you can see what we have. They are displayed as block elements. They're displayed as block elements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that these elements are side by side, and that's going to require me using my CSS code. So at this point, I think we have to go ahead to create our CSS file. So to create our CSS file, it's going to be in here, but not directly inside of the static directory. Probably we should do that in command prompt, but of course we are running the server there. So I'm just going to come here. What we will do is inside of the static directory, we're going to create 2 different folders. One folder is going to be called CSS and the other folder is going to be called JS. So to create a folder, you come to this tag here, this option here, it says new folder. It's different from this one that says new file. So you click on new folder and then you type the name of the folder. So let's say CSS. Good. All right. Now I'm going to create another folder inside of, sorry, not inside of CSS. That would be an error. Okay, let's see. Okay, good. So this folder is going to be named JS. So we now have two different folders inside of static. One of them is a CSS folder, the other is a JavaScript folder, JS for short. So our CSS files will have to be placed inside of the CSS folder, while our JavaScript files will be placed inside of the JavaScript folder. So I'll click on this to create a file. I'm going to call it index.css. It's a CSS file, so the extension has to be .css. I'm just going to go straight away to create a JavaScript file as well, so that we don't have to do it later, go through this process later. So index.js. The extension for a JavaScript file is .js. Okay, good. So now we have a JavaScript file. We also have a CSS file. And the reason we're creating this is right now we're saying that we need to start styling this navigation bar. We want to style this navigation bar, and styling is something that is meant for CSS. We have talked about separation of concerns, and we have said that these different pieces of code should live inside of different files, and then we can link these files together. We've learned how to link our CSS, JavaScript files to our HTML. So let's do the linking, and then after that, we're going to test whether our CSS file has access to the HTML file. So right here in the head section, we use the link tag. Good. So this is going to be slightly different because this is Flask. Ordinarily, to link your CSS file in just an ordinary connecting HTML to CSS files without the Flask application, you need to specify the directories like this. Yes, as you can see, it's giving it to me. But this is a Flask application, so we're not going to do it like this. We're not going to do it like this. The correct way to do it is to create two curly braces, and inside we would say URL underscore for, then open brackets, single quotes, static, comma, file name equals single quotes. Now the name of the folder is CSS, so we type CSS slash, and the name of the CSS file, which is here, is index.css. So we say index.css. All right, we're going to save this. If we refresh the page, nothing is going to happen because we haven't entered any CSS code. So just to run a test, let's see what we get. Let's style the background color of the body background. Let's say red, and see if it works. All right, good. So our CSS file actually has access to our HTML file. Now we can begin to style this page, and particularly we're going to style this navigation bar. That's the focus. So how to create a navigation bar. All right, so I'd like to do a few things. Target all of the elements we're going to be working with, and say box sizing, say border box. Good. And then we target the body, remove the margin, make it 0. If we refresh, good. All right, so now we can begin to deal with this content here. We can begin to style. And I said the first thing I want to do is make sure that these elements are placed side by side. So we need to constantly look at our HTML file to understand the structure that we have in place. So we have a header element here, which is the container element for all of this. It's the container element for all of these. And to make these elements stay side by side, we need to use what we call flex. We also need to understand that inside of the header element, we have two child elements. We have span, and then we have nav. So I want to make these two elements stay side by side. So to do that, I need to target the header element by its class name. So just watch how it's done. You use a dot and then the name of the class, header. So if you take a look at the header tag, it has a class name header. We shouldn't get confused about this. What I am targeting here is the class. not the tag name. As you can see, element class header. All right, so once I have done this, I can now specify the display type I want, flex. Flex simply means that these elements should be placed side by side. This is very good. But again, it doesn't look like all of the elements are side by side. We also need to understand that this navigation element also has children inside of it, and the children are what we can actually see. These children are block elements as well, so I also have to style the navigation elements content to be flexed. I'm also going to use the class name, which is navigation. So instead of writing the code again, I'm going to place a comma here and say dot navigation. All right. So this, what we have here is I'm referencing multiple elements at the same time. I'm referencing multiple elements at the same time. I would have done this. I would have said dot navigation display flex, but this would be a waste of space because this is exactly the same code. All right, good. It flexes them. This is exactly the same code, but it's a waste. Yes, it's a waste of space. It's a waste of resource because I'm writing more code when I could just come here and place it down, and then we have the same result. So take note, make sure that you don't unnecessarily repeat your code. If you can place two elements together and write the same code for them, then you should do that. So this is the first part of getting this to look like a navigation bar. So there are adjustments we have to make. We have to bring this down so that they are on the same level. And to do that again, it means we have to target the navigation bar separately this time around. So I can now say dot navigation. We use margin top to push this element down. So we say 2 rem, this is a unit. Okay, good. That's too much. So we take it down to 1. Okay, which is a little bit not enough. So we make it 1.2. Now we're going to keep changing the values until we get what we want. So good. They look like they are on the same, on a par and the same line. So I think we can go ahead now to continue with this. So the next thing we want to do is to separate these two, make sure that they're not that close to each other. So what I'm going to do now is target the header separately. I'm going to target the header and say justify content. Let's use space. Let's use space evenly and see what we get. Space evenly. Okay, good. So we've been able to separate them from each other. And let's see what other options we have. We can have space around. Space around is going to make them go further apart. And then we have space between. It's going to make them go even further apart. So let's stick with space. Sorry, not space around. I think space evenly was what we used the first time. Okay, this is better. Now you could also use other ways to create a space between these two elements. We have to remember that these two elements are the span, which holds the title. As you can see, it holds the title. The span element holds the title of the web page, and then we have the navigation element, which holds all the navigation items, which are actually too close together. So we're going to move on to make sure that these elements are separate from each other. And to do that, we return to the CSS. We're going to do that inside of here and also see if we can use the justify property, justify content. Let's see space around. Let's see what it's going to do. It's not going to respond. So we're going to find a way to work this out. So what we're likely going to do is say navigation. We're going to target the anchor elements inside of the nav element. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 nav. Yes, we have 4 anchor elements inside. So we're going to target them like this: navigation A. So what this means is we are targeting navigation, which is a container, and we're targeting the anchor elements inside of the navigation container. As you can see, this is a container and it has 4 navigation elements in it. So this is going to target it has 4 anchor elements in it. So this is going to target the anchor elements. So the first thing I'm going to do is make them spread or put a space between them. So I'm going to use margin left, let's say 10 pixels, and see what it gives us. All right, good. That's some space. So we can actually increase to 20 pixels. All right, that's more space. That's more space. And then again, I don't think this underlining really looks good. So we're going to take it out by targeting the text decoration property and say none. We don't want any text decoration. So it takes it out. Yes. So it's looking like we're having something like a navigation bar now. And then we can actually change the color. Let's see, color. Lots of properties that you can interact with and change. So let's say we want the color to be blue. Let's say we have 0f CF and see what we get. Okay, so we get blue. We could get another color. We could have 0f here. We could get something like red. Okay, good. So that's what we have. All right, that's what we have. That's what we have. Now, to make this look, a little bit appealing, to make it look like it's a section of this web page, we may have to start the background of the header alone. So we can have background color. We can just have background, and then we can have, let's see, 003, which is blue. Okay, good. So this is blue. This is blue. We could change the shade of blue, however we want. We can make it light blue, 8. All right. But then again, a Flask app, which is the title, is not very visible. So we can also add color and say we want the color to be white. So this is just a basic. So we're likely going to have to work on these colors better to get a very good feel. So I can use 3F, CF. That's a shade of blue. That's another shade of blue. So I could use AF here. Okay, let's say FF. All right, let's have CF. So I can change this to 1 as well. So there are lots of things you can do. We have color notations, and this is one of the ways you can specify colors by using these notations, numbers and letters. The letters always end at F and the numbers end at 9. Okay, so this is what we have. I think I'm also going to change the color of the the links. So let's see if we can have AF, close to black, I think. Okay, so let's just leave this at this and do some other things. So basically, this is how to create your Flask web application, how to run the server, how to access the file from the server through the server using this address, the address you specify in your book, in the book.py file. That's the address we specify. So we're going to do a very quick test to see if that's actually what is working. We're going to, this is the server here, stop this, and then in our file, we're going to specify a different address. Let's say 5100. That's the port from which we can access the web file. So we run the server again and good. You can see here it says running on HTTP 127.0.0.1 colon 5100. So the server address has changed, and that's going to affect this. You won't be able to access this web page on the server using the port 5000. It has to be 5010. All right, good. So I think this should help us understand how servers work. Servers have addresses, and if we don't have the right address to that server, we won't be able to access the files on that server, the web files on that server. So that's just a small one. So you could go ahead to do this, and let's see what other styling we could add to this, and maybe make the page look a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to try to do here is try to interact with the title which has not been referenced here. Source title. Okay, good. So I'm going to access that and try to do something to it. To access an HTML element in CSS that has a class name, you use a dot and you type the class name. As you can see, this is the title here, a Flask app, and it's inside of an H3 element. This is the H3 element. We need to understand this very clearly. This is the H3 element. I don't understand what's going on. So this is the H3 element here. And this H3 element is what is holding the title of the web page. And this element has a class name of title. So to be able to target this element by its class name, you need to use a dot and the name of the class. And then we can go ahead and begin to style a Flask app, which is the title. So one of the things we could do is we could give it a background of its own that's going to somehow contrast the current background. So we could say the background should be white. Of course, we're not going to be able to see the text anymore. And then we'll have to change the color to something we can work with. Let's say 003, which is a shade of blue. All right, good. And then let's see if we can make it good. We're going to add some padding to this, let's say 10 pixels, so that there is a good deal of space between the container and the text inside. And then we want to make it look good. So we use border radius to make the corners rounded. These sharp edges are going to become rounded. All right, good. So we have something better. And then let's see what else we can do. We can reduce the padding, let's say by 2 pixels. Okay, good. So I think this is okay. And then let me see if I can actually take out the background color. Let's work with this background color. And then what I may want to do is, make the user believe that there is a shadow at the bottom of this here. So to do that, we use what we call box shadow property. Let's have 2 pixels, 2 pixels, and then we have 3 pixels. We're still going to adjust this much later, and we use RGBA, RGBA, red, green, block, and alpha. So red is going to be 0, green is 0, and red, green, blue is going to be 200. As you can see, it's already telling me what color I'm going to select. And alpha, let's have 0.7. So let's see how this is going to affect this. So what's going to make this really come out nice is when we have the white color. White is going to contrast the blue, and then we will be able to see the result of this box shadow. This is not going well. Box shadow. Okay. Color is blue. Oh, this is an error. Okay. Okay, so we can see the shadow around the element. So there's a shadow around the element. We can reduce the shadow and decide on which side the shadow appears. So this is what we have. I can change the color of the text to white so it comes out better. So we have a Flask app, we have this. All right, so we can actually do the same for these other elements. We can do the same for these other elements. So I'm likely going to stop it here. You should be able to create something like this and make sure it looks good. You can change colors, change other things. So basically, again, this is how to create your first Flask web application, how to add some content to the HTML page, how to get your CSS file, where to create your CSS and JavaScript files, how to link your CSS file to the index.html file or any other HTML file that you'll be working with, and then how to run your Flask server. So these things are very, very important. So this is the first step. You should be able to do this. And from here, we can now move on to begin to design an application that is going to actually do something, an application that you can actually, a web application that you can actually showcase on the web. You're going to be getting more tips on how to do lots of things separately, regardless of whether we'll be working with a full scale application. You get short videos and other short tips on how to do individual tasks on your web page. So make sure you practice, make sure you test, you experiment. If you look at your Visual Studio Code window, you always have suggestions that you can try out, lots of things that you could do. For example, I could quickly do this and use the hover to target when I place the cursor over it. So what do I want to happen when I place the cursor over this? I can specify that right here. I could say the padding should increase. I could say the padding should be 12, 14 pixels when I refresh. So when I place this here, you can see that it changes, it moves. So there are lots of things to experiment on. The padding originally is 8 pixels. Then I can also say the background color should change when I hover. So background could change to, let's see, let's look for a color that's going to be nice. So let's say 0F, AF, 0F. So that's a shade of green. So when I do this, it changes to a shade of green. Now I can also say when I hover over it, the color should change. I'll say yellow. All right, so lots of things you can experiment with. You can do this with this. You can do this also with the links that we have here. So please make sure you practice and then you experiment.